Well, I guess you just kind of wing it, throw it out there, right? No, it's not that way. You got a swing point of high over here, but if you look around, there's really nothing to stop it. It's already started the break. The break was here, and then we've got other evidence outside of this, which we'll go to next. But that's the break. It's already on the break here. Let's go to the next one. Let's look at the Dow while we're here, and let me get the Dow up. And I'll show you here, this one's at the bottom end of the range now. It hasn't broken yet, but it's right at the bottom end of the range. This one never got over the highs. Remember, the Dow tested 3 times at the highs, failed on every one of them, failed on all of them on lower volume. Now it's back to the bottom of the range. This one also wants to come back into the high of that breakdown bar. That's the July 31st bar when everything kind of went to heck. That top is 16,869. That's where the Dow wants to head. If we move on down the list here and go over to the strong sectors, the IXIC, the NASDAQ composite also has the range, right? Right at the bottom of it tonight, just along with everything else. Wants to break down. Where does it want to come back to? It wants to come back and do the retest regen off the prior highs. That's its target. Again, if you draw in the equidistance, you'll see they all fall back in about where they should. Everything kind of lines up, and that's the way you want to see it. They're all lined up perfectly to do the same sort of thing. And if we look at the NDX, exactly the same, right? Set up the same way. The NDX is going to be the NDX has been the strong one, right? And the NDX on the way back, if you do the equidistant here, it's going to get it back to almost that same price point. Pull this up here a little bit. That's right in there. That's going to bring it right back into that swing point high. What is that? That's a retest regen after a breakout without a prior test. Now, the thing to notice here, and we don't want to lose fact of this, is that this is way more than 6 bars. When you come back more than 6 bars, the odds are very high, you know, that this thing is going to flip around and go back the other way. How high? It's about an 80% probability of that taking place. So when you see this 80% probability, that says, hey, this thing can trade right back up to where it came from once it does what it needs to do. So as it comes back into this area, and that area, if we draw it in again correctly, is back down here off of this bar. If we come back into this area, right, that's where it should get a fairly high probability of flipping around, going back the other way. That's true here. That's true in the NASDAQ composite itself. Okay, what's going to make it go down? Well, we only have the S&P starting to break down, but we actually, if we look elsewhere on the major 5, we've got the Russell, which has been the lead dog on the way down, breaking down to an ABCD structure to the downside. So breaks down today, gets underneath it. This one's going to try to do a little small ABCD down. It's going to pull it back, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this one overshoot and get into the top of that same bar everybody else is trying to get to. Being the weakest of the group, you would think it would try to make its run there. That's the July 31st bar as well. That's where the volume is. That's where this one's probably going to want to go. Maybe it does it in a staggered way, you know, where it comes down, bounces up, and then comes back and finishes it that way. Whatever the case, Russell is probably going to try to get into that bar before it's done. Has the ABCD structure down. So you got a break on the S&Ps. You got the Russell starting an ABCD structure, bearish ABCD structure. It doesn't measure that far. We're talking 1150, right? So 1150 gets you right up into this area, gets you into this bar. So you won't even break a swing point low on it, if it only extends there. If it does bounce from there and come back down and, you know, reach that target, that would probably be the more ideal case in terms of the way it should work. But as we know, everything doesn't work as it should. It works in gallops a lot of times anymore. So Russell, and you can see, you know, the Russell, folks, this thing's still negative on the year. You're sporting gains of 9-8% on the S&P, on NASDAQ. Russell can't even get out above water. This market, you know, I don't want to be too bearish, because being too bearish in this market is a death sentence. But it needs a correction, has needed a correction, is still going to get a correction at some point. This one is just another little leg back down, and then I suspect the buyers are going to jump all over it again, try to take it back up one more time. We are in September, October, those are the toughest months usually. You got earnings that are going to start up in October. They're not that far away. You got a Fed meeting now coming up. And what caused all this today was Apple. And we talked about Apple last night. I said last night we were probably going to get a down day today. And the reason for it was the Apple news, more than likely. And then, of course, Apple, not to disappoint, Apple takes a big dive. And that's after it runs all the way back up to the top of the breakdown bar. And if you remember, when we did this dive the last time, I had said that this has been bullish for a while and that this could get, they love to take them all the way back up. You usually don't see it work this way, though. Usually it's a crawl back up and then they hammer it. What happens today? Apple goes up to 103.08. The top of this bar was 103.20. Misses it by 12 cents, so it didn't test that top. That's important, right? Because look at your volume. Volume expands. Where does it close? Lower low. Apple's going south, folks. Apple's going to take NASDAQ with it, or NDX with it. It's a heavyweight in the S&P. It's heavyweight in everything, but especially the NDX. So that's going to be tugging on the NDX. And as we talked about last night, if you stuck around for the latter part of the show, we talked about the fact that Apple would be doing its thing, and the question would be, would it pull the others with it? Well, Google went with it today. Google was trying to do an ABCD structure on the upside on the weekly, a nested one. I actually had an ABCD structure going here, and not to be. Back the other way, falls back up underneath the swing point high, wants to trade back lower. At this point, it appears. The other strength, of course, was Microsoft. Microsoft didn't give it up today, but if you look at Microsoft, yesterday's high, 46.80. Today's high, over it. Where does it close? 46.76. What's the volume? Lower. That's an over-under. This thing wants to come back into the swing point high, do a retest regen off of it. Now, if you come back within 6 bars, there's a good chance you can get the back side of that. That says that not only would it retest here, it potentially could test all the way down to there. That would be a fairly significant drop if it happens that way. It does have ABCD structures on the way up. Maybe this will be the savior for the NASDAQ, maybe not. But as it stands tonight, looks like these markets are going to come back the other way. Let's go look at the sectors, because the sectors, well, first of all, overseas, you're not really seeing any reaction. You're going to see that tonight. You didn't see it today. You're going to see it tonight in those markets. And that will be an interesting tell, because it will give us some clue as to what it's going to look like tomorrow, the landscape tomorrow, and here domestically. IYT, if we look at the sectors, IYT comes off, and I'd be particularly, going back to the world markets, I'd be particularly interested in what happens in Asia tonight. I suspect Europe will trade down. I'm more curious about how Asia holds up, because so far Asia has withstood everything, and that will be a key tell. Looking at going back to the sectors, IYT comes down, no volume, it's going to do a retest regen. The SOX, remember the SOX got over the highs yesterday, or 2 days ago, got over the highs. It was an okay bar yesterday, some volume. No volume today, back in to do a retest regen off the high it broke. That top to bottom is 88.66, the bottom is 88.10. We close 88.16. It's going to try to break it tomorrow. If it does break it tomorrow, that's within 6 bars. It's highly likely it will test the low, which is what it's doing. And if it breaks it, when you come back within 6 bars, you're 50-50 chance almost. If it does break it here, then you're back into a range trade. That kind of changes the whole equation on this thing. And remember, this almost met its ABCD structure on the way up, so it's due. XLB comes back hard, doing a full retest regen off that high. It's not the first time. It's tested it several times. When you come back after that many times, odds are pretty decent you're going to break it. It will be a chore to break it though. If it does, the bar it's going to try to get back into is the top over here of the 30th of June, 49.72. So not the end of the world. And I'm not calling for the end of the world here. What I'm saying is that we're going to finally get a pullback. I suspect they're going to buy it just like they always do. But folks, eventually one of these pullbacks is going to turn into something more atrocious. It's not going to be the little dip and rip back the other way. And so what we always have to do is continue to watch these, measure them, see how they bounce, and then see if something larger is actually taking place. As I told you last night, I believe it was last night, we talked about the currencies and the fast moves there. Those fast moves usually end up into the stock markets. In other words, you see repercussions of those fast moves in the market. The way this dollar has moved up, I can guarantee you, companies are on the wrong side. Big multinational companies are on the wrong side of that trade probably. They don't have enough hedged, and they're probably getting hit on their earnings as a result of it. And when the earnings come out in October, you're going to see a hit on the earnings as a result of the strong dollar. You're also going to see a hit because of Europe in general. And you know, those two things together for the large cap companies, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to make the numbers. Going on forward here, so that's the XLB. Let's pop through the rest of them real quick. The XLE was the strongest this morning. By the end of the day, it was giving it up again. This thing is going to test this bottom. It hasn't quite got there. It almost got there today. 94.49, got to 94.59. It's doing 9.9, almost 10, going into 13. If volume picks up tomorrow, it'll blow that out, do the ABCD structure on the way down on a weekly. A much larger structure would be the first to go breaking back down to the downside again. XLF, it comes off pretty hard today. Also coming back, going to do a swing point high, retest, reach in. XLI, hanging at the high still. XLK, you can imagine this one came off, tested the tops, had more volume. That says it can go back up there again, but I don't think it's going to go up there within the next day or two. It's going to leave some little volume. And remember, that's not big volume, so it doesn't have to test it. It says it could, but it doesn't have to. XLV, this has been the strong one, still hanging at the highs. XLY started to come off again today. That was the other one, like the XLB. It's going to do a retest, reach in off this prior high. So when I look at the sectors, I look at the markets, I look at the fact that we finally got some breaks. We're going to get a pullback. We're talking, you know, another 0.5% on the Russell, another 20 points or so on the SPX, 18 points on the SPX. We're not talking major numbers. We're just talking about a small pullback, and then I suspect they will buy it again, and then we'll see what they do with it, because that bounce is always the one you want to measure against. All right, let's turn our attention to a couple of questions. Let me see, some of them were emailed, so let me pop in and look at those. So the first one is Watt. So let's see what Watt is doing. So Watt, I'm told, is considered by some analysts as being the primary beneficiary of the wireless energy charging, and particularly if Apple's going to use it in their products. I didn't see what what the effect was on Apple. But the question today was, you know, it was doing an ABCD pattern to the downside, and the question was, what did it look like? Let me pop into the weekly first. So the ABCD down was here on the weekly, and it abruptly flipped around and nullified that. So this is a fairly new issue. It's only traded for, what, 6 months? And you don't have a lot to work with here. So what I would look at, 1333. I think if you get a close over 1333, you did 1.5 million there. It's doing 772, so it's going to have the volume. If you close over this, you're going to go back to these highs, and those highs are 1644. That's about $3 higher. Let's go back to the daily now, right quick. The daily chart, and nice volume spike. So clearly the Apple effect was in effect here. So 1333 was the number over there. The number here is 1369, and the swing point high is 1320. I still think 1333. Close over 13, or it looks like it's going to close over 1333. I would think you're going back to the highs, and evidently it's going to be a benefactor of Apple's news, given the results I see here today. So that's what that one looks like. Next one here, let's see what this one was. So the next one was Chipotle. So let's pull up Chipotle, CMG. So this is, of course, the burrito bandits. These guys never seem to come down either, but they got a little spill today. Okay, so they're coming back in about swing point high. Well, it's not swing point high. The breakout highs high. That was on earnings 667.90. It's trading down to 669.95 was the close on the lows, and it's not doing much volume. I don't know. That looks pretty good to me. Let's see what the weekly looks like. So how much was this bump? This bump was 582 to 670. So that's a 90-point bump on 582. Those numbers are too big for me to do the math. Let me quickly get a calculator out and see. So 90 divided by 582. That's about 13.5, almost 14%. So 14% jump, and you're coming back. Yeah, I think you want to try to let it get into this. You just broke a swing point low, and you're going to have a shot at testing this other one. That low is 664. This low is 657. I would try to get it somewhere between those two. So the ideal place for me would be the first buy would be in here somewhere, right at the bottom of the support zone that the charts are showing you, the green, and at the bottom of this particular bar. That would be the ideal spot. And why that? Because I think it could bleed, and you'd have to do your second buy down in here in the gap somewhere. And you're not going to want to buy that if you buy it up here someplace. So, you know, let it come back a little bit farther. I think the market's going to give you enough weakness to pull it down into this area, and that could be your buy. You do have a decent little spike up here. They sold it off fast. I don't know what that news was. But, you know, this looks like a decent range trade. You know, let me look at it one other way real quick. If I look at this and then throw that on top, yeah, so you kind of actually have three equidistant ranges, and you're coming back into, you see how it's coming right back in to test the low of that range. That's where it's going to go to. That's off this the swing point low. So that's where I would be looking. I'd try to pull it in there. That would be the spot. Got a question just popped up here about UNL, UNG. So these guys really were benefactors of this rumor today, or not so much a rumor, but news that Europe wants to do some buying. And let me see here. Yeah, I don't know. That one is that's kind of a tough one because it didn't have much volume today. Let's see what UNG, which is just front month. I doubt they didn't get. Yeah, they actually got over it, but they fell under it. See, they actually fell under it on the close, 21.71. I would probably let this come in one more time. I know it looks like it's just going to pop and run, but I'd probably just try to let it come in one more time, not CMG, but UNL, and try to pick it up on the next one, or at least let it come in some and pick it up. And the ideal spot here would be, you know, back into this bar's top, 1764 down to 1745 is where I'd look for it. And I'm looking at UNL. I think that's your better bet on these because it's spread out. One last one here, VIAB. Let's see what this one looks like. Bottom of a range. Hey, and Tommy, you got it right yesterday on your oil, but it didn't stay. You were asking me about the oil, and it looked like you were right this morning. So Viacom is, let me see here, low was 79.27, 79.20 it closes, has a little less volume. Let me see what the weekly looks like. What do you want to buy this? No, I wouldn't buy this, man. This is fixing to break. It doesn't, let me see, what is the volume here? 4.8, 2 days in, so that's 2.45 times is 10, that's about 12. It isn't going to have the volume, but if it gets under that low, well, actually that's not a swing point low, is it? Let me go back here just 1 second. Yeah, it may hold. It may hold here. I don't like the chart, but it may hold. I probably wouldn't buy it myself. So depending on what you're trying to do with it, it does look like it's got a shot of holding here, but boy, that was a lot of volume down. It's testing it now. Let it test it, and if it holds by the end of the week, then you got something potentially on a nice little bounce. But where can it go? I mean, that's the problem here. Where can it go, right? The problem here is, this is going to be tough to get back over this area. That's where all your volume is, and that's where the breakdown bar is. So that makes it tough to do anything with it, and the risk is these swing points here. If you break these guys, you're going to get a heck of a move down, and you're already into the big bar on the weekly. So, this could fall out of bed. So just be very careful if you're trying to play the long side. All right, let me see. I'm running out of time. So tomorrow, you got to expect these markets are going to try to work back the other way. And is it going to be a big sell-off? I don't think so. If I'm an intermediate term investor, I'm not doing anything. If I'm trading, I was trading short today. I was trading short yesterday. That was the trade. Probably will be the trade tomorrow. But don't expect this market to just cave in, because nothing big has happened yet. I mean, for goodness sakes, we're only like, what, 2% off the highs or something, or 1% off the highs? So, every time this happens, we start thinking, oh man, finally it's gonna, it's gonna cave in here. But every time it just goes right back up. So yeah, we can get a pullback. We can get a pullback in 1965, but I don't know if it's gonna go much farther than that to start with. Then we measure the bounce. Then we'll see what it's really gonna do. Because if you're a classical guy, you could actually be setting up the argument here that this is a head and shoulders type top, right? You got a left shoulder, a head, and you come back up over here and create a right shoulder. I don't do that anymore because I don't think it adds a lot of value. I could also, if I were doing classic Edwards and McGee, it doesn't even have the right pattern in terms of the volume. But a lot of folks are going to start talking about that if this thing trades down, especially if it trades down to here, right, and then starts bouncing. Then you're going to hear head and shoulders everywhere. But right now, I don't even see the pattern. And if I go out to a weekly, it's a blip. I mean, nothing's happened, right? It's just a little blip. So I wouldn't get too excited. Let's see what the bounce looks like. Then we make some better judgments about what's really going to happen as we move on down the road here. Folks, thanks for joining me. I will see you tomorrow, and we'll pick it up and do it again. Take care. Have a great night. I'll see you next time. Good night, folks.